The moment Florence Jenkins realized her horse absolutely refused to take another step on the dusty trail outside St. George, Utah, she felt her cheeks burn hotter than the afternoon sun beating down on her broad shoulders. It was September of 1878, and she had been traveling for 3 days straight from her father's ranch near Cedar City, heading toward her aunt's home where she was supposed to help with the harvest season. The mare beneath her, a stubborn chestnut named Daisy, had planted all 4 hooves in the red dirt and would not budge no matter how much Florence clicked her tongue or pressed her heels against the animal's flanks. Sweat trickled down her back beneath her modest traveling dress, and she could feel the fabric clinging uncomfortably to her skin. She had always been a larger woman, something her mother had lamented and her father had accepted with quiet resignation. But out here on the open trail, her size made everything more difficult. The saddle seemed smaller, the horse more reluctant, and her own confidence more fragile. She tried again, giving Daisy a gentle kick, but the mare just snorted and tossed her head. Florence felt tears prick at her eyes, though whether from frustration or embarrassment, she could not quite say. The trail was not empty. A freight wagon had passed her 20 minutes ago, and she had seen at least 2 riders in the distance. The last thing she wanted was to be seen as incompetent, as someone who could not even manage her own horse. But Daisy had made up her mind, and Florence was running out of ideas. That was when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from behind. Florence twisted in her saddle, her heart sinking as she saw a lone rider coming up the trail. He sat tall in his saddle, his hat pulled low against the sun, and even from a distance, she could tell he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had spent his entire life on horseback. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. He was young, probably in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His clothes were dusty from travel, but well-maintained, and the horse beneath him was a fine-looking bay gelding that moved with smooth, powerful strides. Florence wanted to disappear. She wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. Instead, she sat frozen on her immobile horse, watching as the stranger approached and then slowed his mount to a walk beside her. "Afternoon, miss," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was warm and pleasant, with a slight drawl that suggested he had grown up somewhere in the South before making his way west. "Seems like you might be having some trouble." Florence swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his eyes. They were a striking shade of gray-green, she noticed, like sage leaves after a rain. "My horse won't move," she admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. "I have been trying for the past 10 minutes, but she just stands here." The stranger studied Daisy for a moment, then looked back at Florence with an expression that held no judgment, only curiosity. "Mind if I take a look?" "Please," Florence said, relief flooding through her. "I do not know what is wrong with her." The man dismounted in one fluid motion and approached Daisy slowly, speaking in a low, soothing voice. The mare's ears swiveled toward him, and Florence watched in amazement as some of the tension seemed to drain from the animal's body. The stranger ran his hands down Daisy's legs, checked her hooves, and examined her tack with practiced efficiency. "Nothing wrong with her physically," he said after a moment. "Some horses just need convincing is all. They get an idea in their head, and they will not let it go until someone shows them a different way of thinking." He looked up at Florence, and she was struck again by the kindness in his eyes. "Would you mind if I led her for a bit? Sometimes a horse will follow where it would not go on its own." Florence nodded, not trusting her voice. The stranger took Daisy's reins and began walking forward, and to Florence's utter astonishment, the mare followed without protest. Just like that, after 10 minutes of stubborn refusal, Daisy was moving again as though nothing had ever been wrong. "I am Samuel Donovan," the man said as he walked beside her horse, leading it down the trail. His own mount followed along behind them, well trained enough not to need guidance. "Most folks call me Sam." "Florence Jenkins," she replied, still marveling at how easily he had solved her problem. "I am grateful for your help, Mr. Donovan. I was beginning to think I would be stuck there until nightfall." "Sam is fine," he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "And it is no trouble at all. Where are you headed?" "My aunt's place, about 5 miles south of St. George," Florence said. "I am supposed to help her with the harvest. She has an apple orchard, and the work is too much for her to manage alone since my uncle passed last winter." "I am sorry for your loss," Sam said quietly. "That is a hard thing." They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Florence found herself studying the man beside her. He moved with an easy grace, his steps confident on the uneven ground. There was something about him that put her at ease, despite her usual discomfort around strangers. Most men either ignored her completely or looked through her as though she were invisible. Sam, however, had treated her with genuine courtesy, as though helping her was the most natural thing in the world. "What brings you to this part of Utah?" she asked, curious despite herself. "Work," Sam said. "I have been running cattle drives for the past few years, but I am looking to settle down somewhere. St. George seems like a good town, growing but not so big that a man gets lost in it. I heard they are looking for hands at some of the ranches around here, so I thought I would see what was available." "You are a long way from home," Florence observed. "If you do not mind my saying so, you sound like you come from somewhere east of here." "Georgia originally," Sam confirmed. "But I left there when I was 17. Wanted to see what the West had to offer. I have worked ranches in Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado. Utah is new territory for me, though." "It is beautiful country," Florence said, gesturing at the red rock formations that rose up around them like ancient sentinels. "Different from anywhere else I have ever been. The summers are hot, but the winters are mild compared to some places. And the people are generally good, hard-working folks." "Sounds like exactly what I am looking for," Sam said. He glanced up at her, and Florence felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "How long have you lived here?" "All my life," she said. "My father has a ranch near Cedar City. He raises cattle and horses. I grew up riding and working alongside him and my brothers." "How many brothers do you have?" "3, all older than me. They are all married now with families of their own." Florence tried to keep the wistfulness out of her voice. Her brothers had all found wives easily enough, strong women who fit seamlessly into the ranch life. Florence had always been the odd one out, too quiet, too heavy, too uncertain of her place in the world. "Must have been something, growing up with 3 older brothers," Sam said. "I bet they taught you how to hold your own." Florence laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "They certainly tried, though I think they spent more time tormenting me than teaching me anything useful." "That sounds about right," Sam agreed. "I had 2 younger sisters, and I am afraid I gave them their fair share of trouble when we were young." "Had?" Florence asked, catching the past tense. Sam's expression grew somber. "Scarlet fever took them both when I was 15. That was part of why I left Georgia. Too many memories, too much grief. My parents understood. They said I needed to find my own way." "I am so sorry," Florence said softly. "That must have been terrible." "It was a long time ago," Sam said, but she could hear the old pain in his voice. "You learn to carry it. The grief does not go away, but you get stronger." They walked on, and Florence found herself relaxing in his presence. There was something comforting about Sam Donovan, something solid and trustworthy. He had not once made her feel self-conscious about her size or her predicament with the horse. Instead, he treated her like a person worth talking to, worth helping, worth knowing. After about a mile, Sam stopped and looked up at her. I think Daisy has remembered her manners now. Would you like to try riding her on your own again? Florence nodded, and Sam handed the reins back to her. She gave Daisy a gentle squeeze with her knees, and to her relief, the mare moved forward without hesitation. Well, I will be, Florence said, surprised and pleased. What did you do to her? Nothing much, Sam said, swinging back into his own saddle. Like I said, some horses just need convincing. She needed to remember that moving forward is easier than standing still. He rode up beside her, matching Daisy's pace. Mind if I ride along with you for a bit? I am in no particular hurry, and the company would be welcome. I would like that, Florence said, and she meant it. Though I am afraid I am not very interesting company. I spend most of my time with horses and apple trees, not people. I happen to think horses and apple trees make for excellent conversation, Sam said with a grin. And you are selling yourself short, Miss Jenkins. I have enjoyed talking with you. Florence felt her heart flutter in her chest, a sensation she was entirely unfamiliar with. She had never been courted, never had a man show interest in her beyond basic politeness. She told herself not to read too much into Sam's kindness. He was just being friendly, helping a stranger in need. Nothing more. But as they rode together through the red rock landscape, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the trail, Florence could not help but steal glances at him. Sam Donovan was handsome, certainly, but it was more than that. There was a gentleness about him, a quiet strength that made her feel safe in a way she had never experienced before. They talked about everything and nothing as they rode. Sam told her about his time on the cattle drives, about sleeping under the stars and crossing rivers swollen with spring runoff. He spoke of the different towns he had seen, the people he had met, the lessons he had learned about horses and cattle, and the unpredictability of life on the trail. Florence found herself telling him about the orchard, about the satisfaction of watching apple trees bloom in the spring and bear fruit in the fall. She spoke of her father's ranch, of the horses she had helped train, of the vast Utah sky that seemed to stretch on forever. By the time they reached the turnoff for her aunt's property, Florence realized with surprise that the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The hours had passed so quickly, so easily, that she had lost track of time. This is where I turn off, she said reluctantly, gesturing toward a narrow road that led east toward a cluster of trees in the distance. My aunt's orchard is about a mile down that way. Sam pulled his horse to a stop beside her. I am glad I came along when I did, he said. It was a pleasure meeting you, Miss Jenkins. Florence, she said. Please call me Florence. Florence, Sam repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his voice. Would it be all right if I called on you sometime? I know I am a stranger, and you have no reason to trust me beyond the last few hours, but I would very much like to see you again. Florence's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to say yes immediately, but caution held her back. What could Sam Donovan possibly want with her? He could have any woman he set his sights on. He was handsome, kind, capable. Why would he be interested in someone like her? As though reading her thoughts, Sam said quietly, I mean it, Florence. I enjoyed your company today. You were smart and funny, and you clearly know your way around horses and ranching. I would like to get to know you better, if you would give me the chance. Yes, Florence heard herself say. Yes, I would like that. Sam's face lit up with a genuine smile. Your aunt's place, about a mile down this road? You cannot miss it, Florence said. There is a wooden sign at the gate with the name Jasmine carved into it. That is my aunt's name. I will find it, Sam promised. How about I come by the day after tomorrow? That will give you time to settle in and help your aunt with whatever she needs. That would be perfect, Florence said, her heart racing. Sam tipped his hat to her. Until then, Florence Jenkins. He turned his horse and rode back toward the main trail, and Florence sat watching him until he disappeared from view. Only then did she allow herself to smile, a wide, giddy smile that made her feel like a girl half her age. She urged Daisy forward down the narrow road toward her aunt's orchard, her mind whirling with the events of the day. She had left her father's ranch that morning expecting nothing more than a long, boring journey and several weeks of hard work in the orchard. Instead, she had met Samuel Donovan, and everything had changed. Her Aunt Jasmine was waiting on the porch when Florence rode up to the small farmhouse nestled among the apple trees. Jasmine was her mother's older sister, a woman of 60 years with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She had been widowed the previous winter when her husband succumbed to pneumonia, and Florence had volunteered to come help her with the harvest, knowing that the work would be too much for one woman to handle alone. "Florence," Jasmine called out, hurrying down the porch steps despite her age. "I was beginning to worry. I expected you hours ago." "I am sorry, Aunt Jasmine," Florence said, dismounting carefully. Her legs were stiff from the long ride, and she stumbled slightly as her feet hit the ground. Daisy decided to be stubborn, and I was stuck on the trail for a while. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. "Stubborn how?" "She just stopped moving," Florence explained. "I tried everything, but she would not budge. Fortunately, a man came along and helped me. He led her for a while, and after that, she was fine." "A man?" Jasmine's expression grew interested. "What kind of man?" Florence felt her cheeks heat. "His name is Samuel Donovan. He is new to the area, looking for ranch work. He was very kind and helpful. And handsome, I am guessing, based on the color of your face," Jasmine said with a knowing smile. "Aunt Jasmine," Florence protested, but she could not help but laugh. "Well, come inside and tell me all about this Samuel Donovan while I heat up some supper," Jasmine said, linking her arm through Florence's. "And then you can tell me why you look like you just won a prize at the county fair." Over a meal of stew and fresh bread, Florence told her aunt everything about her encounter with Sam. Jasmine listened carefully, asking occasional questions, and Florence could see the concern mixed with hope in her aunt's eyes. "He sounds like a decent man," Jasmine said when Florence had finished. "But be careful, dear. You have a tender heart, and I would not want to see it broken." "I know," Florence said quietly. "I am not getting my hopes up. He was just being kind." "Kindness is one thing," Jasmine said. "Asking to call on you is another. He must have seen something in you that he liked, and that is worth paying attention to. Just promise me you will take your time getting to know him. Do not rush into anything." "I promise," Florence said, "though I am not sure what he sees in me. I am not exactly the kind of woman men usually notice." Jasmine reached across the table and took Florence's hand. "You listen to me, Florence Jenkins. You are a beautiful woman with a good heart and a sharp mind. Any man who cannot see that is not worth your time. If the Samuel Donovan truly sees you for who you are, then he might be someone worth knowing." Florence squeezed her aunt's hand, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "Thank you, Aunt Jasmine." "Now, no more crying," Jasmine said briskly. "We have work to do tomorrow, and you need your rest. Let me show you to your room." The next day and a half passed in a blur of activity. The orchard was extensive, covering nearly 20 acres, and the apple trees were heavy with fruit ready for harvest. Florence and Jasmine worked from dawn until dusk, picking apples and sorting them into crates for sale at the market in St. George. The work was hard and physical, but Florence found it satisfying. There was something deeply rewarding about the simple act of gathering food, of seeing the tangible results of labor. But no matter how hard she tried to focus on the work, her thoughts kept drifting back to Sam Donovan. She replayed their conversation over and over in her mind, analyzing every word, every gesture, looking for hidden meanings. Part of her was convinced that he would not actually come to call on her, that he had simply been being polite and would forget all about her. Another part of her, a small, hopeful part that she tried to keep locked away, dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had meant what he said. On the afternoon of the second day, Florence was in the orchard with a basket of apples balanced on her hip when she heard the sound of hoofbeats coming down the road. Her heart leaped into her throat, and she set the basket down quickly, smoothing her dress and tucking stray wisps of hair behind her ears. She knew she must look a mess. Her dress was dusty, her face was probably flushed from the exertion, and she could feel sweat dampening her collar. Not exactly the picture of feminine grace. But when Sam Donovan rode into view and saw her standing among the apple trees, his face lit up with such genuine pleasure that Florence felt her breath catch. He had cleaned up since she last saw him, she noticed. His shirt was fresh, his hair was neatly combed, and he had shaved. He dismounted and walked toward her, leading his horse behind him. "Hello, Florence," he said, and she loved the way he said her name, like it was something special. "Hello, Sam," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "You found us all right. Your directions were perfect," Sam said. "Your aunt has a beautiful place here. These apple trees are magnificent." "They are her pride and joy," Florence said. "My uncle planted them 20 years ago, and she has been tending them ever since." "Florence, is that your young man?" Jasmine's voice called out from the direction of the house. Florence felt her face flame. "Aunt Jasmine," she called back, mortified. Sam just laughed. "I take it your aunt is direct." "You have no idea," Florence muttered, but she could not help but smile. They walked together toward the house, where Jasmine was waiting on the porch with her arms crossed and a speculative look in her eyes. Sam removed his hat as they approached and gave Jasmine a respectful nod. "Madam, I am Samuel Donovan. It is a pleasure to meet you." Jasmine looked him up and down, taking his measure. "Jasmine Miller. Florence tells me you helped her with her stubborn horse." "Yes, madam. Daisy just needed a little convincing." "Horses are not the only ones who need convincing," Jasmine said cryptically. "Florence, why do not you show Samuel around the orchard? I will bring out some lemonade and cookies in a bit." "Thank you, Aunt Jasmine," Florence said, grateful for her aunt's tact. She led Sam away from the house, walking between the rows of laden apple trees. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, dappling the ground with patches of light and shadow. Sam walked close beside her, close enough that their arms occasionally brushed, sending little shivers up Florence's spine. "Your aunt seems like quite a character," Sam said with amusement. "She is wonderful," Florence said. "She has had a hard year since my uncle passed, but she has kept going. This orchard means everything to her." "I can see why," Sam said, looking around at the orderly rows of trees. "This is years of careful work and dedication. You can see the love that has gone into it." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, and Florence found herself relaxing. Being with Sam felt natural, easy, like they had known each other for years rather than just a few days. "I got a job," Sam said after a bit, "at the Dalton Ranch, about 3 miles north of St. George. They are looking for someone to help manage their cattle operation and train their horses. The pay is decent, and they are providing a small cabin for me to live in." "That is wonderful," Florence said, genuinely pleased for him. "The Daltons are good people. My father has done business with them for years." "I start in a few days," Sam said, "which means I will be staying in the area. Which means I can come call on you properly, if you are still amenable to that." Florence stopped walking and turned to face him. "Why?" she asked, the question bursting out before she could stop it. Why do you want to call on me? You could have any woman in the territory. Why someone like me? Sam looked at her with those gray-green eyes, and his expression was so sincere it made her chest ache. Because when I talk to you, Florence, I feel like I can be myself. You do not expect me to be anything other than who I am. You are intelligent and kind, and you make me laugh. You know horses and ranching, and you understand the kind of life I want to build. And if I am being completely honest, I think you are beautiful. Beautiful? Florence repeated, unable to keep the skepticism out of her voice. Yes, beautiful, Sam said firmly. You have the most expressive eyes I have ever seen, and when you smile, it lights up your whole face. You carry yourself with a grace that has nothing to do with size and everything to do with confidence and competence. I watched you work with your horse, and I could see the skill and patience you have. That is beautiful to me. Florence felt tears spring to her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. No one has ever said anything like that to me before. Then no one has been paying attention, Sam said. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused from years of ranch work. I would like to get to know you better, Florence Jenkins. I would like to court you properly, with your aunt's permission and your father's blessing. I cannot promise you anything beyond my honest intentions, but I can promise you that I will always treat you with respect and kindness. What do you say? Florence looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. She saw nothing but sincerity there, nothing but genuine interest and affection. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I would like that very much. Sam's smile was brilliant. He squeezed her hand gently, and they stood there in the dappled sunlight of the apple orchard, two people taking the first tentative steps towards something that might become love. Over the next few weeks, Sam became a regular presence at the orchard. He would ride over after finishing his work at the Dalton Ranch, arriving in the early evening when the worst heat of the day had passed. Sometimes he helped Florence and Jasmine with the harvest, his strong arms making quick work of the heavy crates. Other times, he and Florence would simply walk through the orchard together, talking about everything and nothing. Florence learned about his childhood in Georgia, about the pain of losing his sisters, and the difficult decision to leave his parents behind and seek a new life in the West. She told him about growing up the only daughter in a family of sons, about feeling like she never quite fit in anywhere, about her love for horses and open spaces. Sam was a good listener. He never interrupted or dismissed her feelings. He asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. And slowly, gradually, Florence began to believe that maybe he truly did see something in her worth caring about. One evening in early October, after the harvest was nearly complete, Sam suggested they ride out to see the sunset from a nearby mesa. Jasmine had given her approval with a knowing wink, and Florence had changed into her riding skirt and blouse, her heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. They rode side by side through the red rock landscape, the setting sun painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. When they reached the top of the mesa, they dismounted and stood looking out over the vast expanse of Utah territory spread out before them. I love this country, Sam said quietly. I have been all over the West, but there is something about this place that feels like home. I know what you mean, Florence said. I cannot imagine living anywhere else. Sam turned to face her, and there was something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. Florence, I need to tell you something. These past few weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has been the best part of coming to Utah. I look forward to seeing you every day. You make me laugh. You challenge me to think differently, and you make me want to be a better man. Sam, Florence started, but he held up a hand. Let me finish, he said. I know we have only known each other for a short time, but I also know that what I feel for you is real. I am falling in love with you, Florence Jenkins. And I needed you to know that." Florence felt like the world had tilted on its axis. "You are falling in love with me?" she repeated, hardly daring to believe it. "I am," Sam confirmed. "Completely and absolutely falling in love with you." "I am falling in love with you too," Florence said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I have been trying to protect myself in case this was not real, but I cannot help it. You have become so important to me, Sam. I think about you all the time. I miss you when you are not here. And when I am with you, I feel like I can be completely myself." Sam closed the distance between them and cupped her face gently in his hands. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. Florence nodded, unable to speak. Sam leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, and then his lips were on hers, warm and gentle and perfect. Florence had never been kissed before, and she had certainly never imagined her first kiss would feel like this. Like coming home. Like finding something she had been searching for her entire life without even knowing it. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. Sam rested his forehead against hers, and Florence could feel him smiling. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "I am glad you finally did," Florence said, and they both laughed. They stayed on the mesa until the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, sitting close together and making plans for the future. Sam talked about eventually saving enough money to buy his own piece of land, about building a ranch where they could raise horses and cattle. Florence talked about her dream of breeding horses, of creating a line of strong, reliable mounts that could withstand the harsh Utah climate. Their dreams wove together seamlessly, two individual visions merging into one shared future. When they finally rode back to the orchard, Jasmine was waiting on the porch with a knowing smile. "Took you long enough," she said as they approached. "I was beginning to think I would have to send out a search party." "We were just talking, Aunt Jasmine," Florence said, though she knew her flushed cheeks and bright eyes were giving her away. "Talking, Jasmine said with a wink. "Well, Samuel, I suppose you will be wanting to speak to Florence's father at some point." Sam looked surprised, then pleased. "Yes, madam, I will. I was planning to ride to Cedar City next week to introduce myself properly and ask for his blessing." "Good," Jasmine said with satisfaction. "Harold Jenkins is a fair man, but he will want to take your measure before he gives his approval. Be prepared to answer a lot of questions." "I would expect nothing less," Sam said. "Florence is precious, and her father has every right to be protective." Florence felt her heart swell with love for this man who understood her family, who respected her father's authority, who treated her like something valuable and cherished. The following week, Sam made the journey to Cedar City. Florence stayed behind at the orchard, too nervous to accompany him. She spent the day in a state of constant anxiety, unable to focus on anything. Jasmine finally took pity on her and sent her out to work in the barn, knowing that physical labor would help calm her nerves. Sam returned late in the afternoon, and Florence knew immediately from his expression that things had gone well. She ran out to meet him, propriety forgotten, and he caught her in a tight embrace. "Your father gave his blessing," Sam said, his voice full of joy. "He made me sweat for it, asked me about 100 questions, and made it very clear what would happen to me if I ever hurt you. But in the end, he said yes." Florence felt tears of happiness streaming down her face. "He did? Really? Really?" Sam confirmed. He pulled back slightly and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold ring. "Florence Jenkins, I know I should probably wait longer, give us more time to court properly, but I am sure about this. I am sure about you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Florence said without hesitation. Yes, absolutely yes. Sam slipped the ring onto her finger. It was a little loose, but he promised to have it sized to fit properly. Then he kissed her again, right there in front of the orchard and God and anyone else who might be watching. They were married 6 weeks later in early November, in a small ceremony at the church in St. George. Florence's father and brothers traveled from Cedar City, and Sam's employer from the Dalton Ranch stood up as his best man. Jasmine cried through the entire ceremony, happy tears that she made no effort to hide. Florence wore a simple blue dress that she and Jasmine had spent weeks making, and Sam wore his best suit. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Sam kissed her in front of the assembled congregation, Florence felt like her heart might burst from sheer happiness. They spent their wedding night at a small hotel in St. George, and if Sam was disappointed by Florence's nervousness and inexperience, he never showed it. He was patient and gentle, making her feel cherished and beautiful. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Florence traced patterns on his chest and marveled at how dramatically her life had changed. "What are you thinking about?" Sam asked, his voice drowsy. "About how lucky I am," Florence said. "A few months ago, I was convinced I would spend my whole life alone. And now here I am, married to the most wonderful man I have ever met." "I am the lucky one," Sam said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I came to Utah looking for work, and I found everything I never knew I was searching for." They moved into the small cabin at the Dalton Ranch, and Florence threw herself into making it a home. She sewed curtains for the windows, planted a small garden, and helped Sam with his work whenever she could. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. They would wake at dawn and work until dusk, sharing the daily tasks of ranch life. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the red rocks and talking about their dreams for the future. By the following spring, Florence discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled them both with joy and a touch of fear. Childbirth was dangerous, and many women did not survive it. But Florence was strong and healthy, and the local midwife assured her that she had nothing to worry about. She continued working as long as she could, stubbornly refusing to be treated like an invalid. Sam hovered over her constantly, worried that she was doing too much, but Florence just laughed and told him she was perfectly capable of doing her chores. In September of 1879, exactly 1 year after the day Florence's horse had refused to move and Sam had come to her rescue, Florence gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after Sam's father, and he had his father's gray-green eyes and his mother's dark hair. Sam was a devoted father from the moment Thomas was born. Florence would wake in the night to find Sam sitting in the rocking chair, holding their son and singing soft lullabies in his deep voice. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, and beamed with pride whenever anyone commented on what a fine baby they had. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Sam and Florence continued to work hard and save their money. They were determined to buy their own land someday, to build something permanent that they could pass down to their children. The Daltons had been good employers, but both Sam and Florence dreamed of independence, of answering to no one but themselves. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah, was born in the spring of 1881. She was tiny and delicate, with Florence's brown eyes and Sam's easy smile. Thomas, now a rambunctious 2-year-old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. Florence thrived as a mother. She had worried that she would not know what to do, that she would somehow fail her children. But motherhood came naturally to her. She was patient and loving, firm when she needed to be but always gentle. Sam often told her that she was the best mother he could have imagined for their children, and those words meant more to Florence than he could ever know. In the summer of 1882, Sam came home one evening with exciting news. A piece of property about 10 miles southeast of St. George was going up for sale. It was not large, only about 100 acres, but it had good water rights, adequate grazing land for cattle, and a small house that needed work but was structurally sound. "I think we can afford it," Sam said, spreading out the papers on their small kitchen table. "We have been saving for years now, and the Daltons have offered to loan us the remainder at a fair interest rate. What do you think?" Florence studied the property description, her heart racing with excitement. "I think it is perfect," she said. "I think it is everything we have been working toward." They purchased the property in August, and the entire family moved to their new home with high hopes and big dreams. The house was small, only 3 rooms, but it was theirs. Sam immediately began making improvements, adding a proper kitchen and enlarging the bedrooms. Florence started planning a larger garden and a chicken coop. They bought a small herd of cattle and several horses, including Daisy, who was now getting on in years but was still a reliable mount. Life on their own ranch was harder than working for someone else, but it was also more rewarding. Every improvement they made, every calf that was born, every successful harvest from their garden felt like a personal triumph. They were building something together, creating a legacy for their children. Over the next several years, their family continued to grow. Another son, James, was born in 1883, followed by a second daughter, Emma, in 1885. Their house grew with their family, as Sam added rooms whenever Florence announced another pregnancy. Money was often tight, and there were lean years when the cattle prices were low or drought threatened their water supply. But Sam and Florence faced every challenge together, their love for each other and their family giving them the strength to persevere. Florence often thought back to that day on the trail when Daisy had refused to move. If her horse had not been stubborn, if Sam had not come along at exactly the right moment, her entire life would have been different. She would never have met the man who became her husband, never had her beautiful children, never built this life that brought her such profound joy. "Some horses need convincing," Sam had said that day, and Florence had learned that the same was true for people. She had needed convincing that she was worthy of love, that someone could see past her size and her insecurities to the person she truly was inside. Sam had been patient with her, had shown her through his actions and his words that she was valuable and cherished. As the years passed, their ranch prospered. Sam proved to be as skilled at breeding horses as he was at managing cattle, and they developed a reputation for selling strong, reliable mounts. Florence managed the financial side of the business with a sharp eye and a head for numbers. Their children grew up strong and healthy, learning the value of hard work and the importance of family. Thomas, their eldest, inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's stubborn determination. He announced at the age of 15 that he intended to stay on the ranch and work alongside his parents for the rest of his life. Sam and Florence exchanged glances over his head, both of them feeling that mixture of pride and relief that comes from knowing at least one of your children will carry on what you have built. Sarah, their oldest daughter, was quieter and more introspective. She loved books and learning, and Florence made sure she had access to whatever reading material they could afford. Sarah talked about becoming a teacher someday, about opening a school for the children in the outlying ranches who had no access to formal education. James was the wild one, always getting into mischief, always pushing boundaries. He reminded Florence of her brothers when they were young, full of energy and curiosity and a complete disregard for danger. Sam spent many evenings patching up James's scrapes and bruises, shaking his head but unable to hide his amusement. Emma, the youngest, was the family charmer. She could wrap anyone around her little finger with her smile and her clever words. She loved the animals on the ranch, especially the horses, and Florence knew that Emma would grow up to be a skilled horsewoman. On their 10th wedding anniversary in November of 1888, Sam surprised Florence with a special gift. He led her out to the barn, where a beautiful mare stood waiting. The horse was a stunning dappled gray with intelligent eyes and perfect conformation. "She is ours," Sam said, grinning at Florence's expression. "Or rather, she is yours. I have been saving for her for 2 years now. I thought you could use her as the foundation of your breeding program." Florence was speechless. She had talked about wanting to start selectively breeding horses, about creating a line that combined beauty with strength and endurance. But it had always been a distant dream, something for the future when they had more money and more time. Sam had been listening, had been planning, had made her dream a reality. "Sam," she whispered, running her hands over the mare's sleek coat. "She is perfect. How did you find her?" "I put out inquiries with every horse trader I know," Sam said. "When I heard about this one, I traveled all the way to Arizona to see her. The moment I laid eyes on her, I knew she was the one you needed." Florence turned to her husband, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you for believing in my dreams." "Your dreams are my dreams," Sam said simply, pulling her into his arms. "Always have been, always will be." Florence named the mare Sage, and she became the foundation of what would eventually be known as the Jenkins line of horses. Over the next decade, Florence bred Sage carefully, selecting stallions with the traits she wanted to emphasize. The resulting foals were strong, intelligent, and remarkably even-tempered. Word spread about the quality of the Jenkins horses, and buyers came from as far as California and Colorado to purchase them. The additional income from the horse breeding allowed them to expand their cattle operation and make further improvements to their property. They built a proper barn, a larger house, and even a small bunkhouse for the hired hands they now needed to help with the work. Florence and Sam's children grew into young adults, each finding their own path in life. Thomas married a girl from town named Rebecca in 1894 and brought her home to the ranch. Rebecca fit seamlessly into the family, and within a year, she had given Florence and Sam their first grandchild, a boy they named Samuel after his grandfather. Sarah fulfilled her dream of becoming a teacher. She opened a small school in a building that Sam and Thomas built for her, and children from the surrounding ranches rode in several times a week for lessons. Sarah never married, content with her books and her students and her place in the family. James left home at 18 to work on the railroad. He would come home for visits, full of stories about the places he had seen and the things he had done. He eventually settled in Denver, where he married and started a business hauling freight. He wrote letters regularly and visited when he could, and while Florence missed him terribly, she was proud of the life he had built for himself. Emma, to no one's surprise, married a rancher named William from a neighboring property. She continued to help Florence with the horse breeding program, showing the same patience and skill with the animals that her mother possessed. She and William had 3 children in quick succession, and Florence delighted in being a grandmother to all of them. As Florence entered her 40s and then her 50s, she found herself increasingly grateful for the life she had built. There had been hard times, certainly. Years of drought, illness that swept through the family, the constant worry about money and weather and all the unpredictable challenges of ranch life. But through it all, Sam had been beside her, steady and supportive and endlessly loving. They would sit together on their porch in the evenings, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, and marvel at how far they had come from that day on the trail when a stubborn horse had refused to move. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Daisy had not stopped that day?" Florence asked one evening in the summer of 1898. 20 years had passed since they first met, and Florence could see the gray in Sam's hair and the lines around his eyes. But to her, he was still the handsome cowboy who had treated her with kindness when she needed it most. "All the time," Sam admitted, "I think about how easily we might never have met. I could have taken a different trail, or arrived an hour earlier or later. But somehow, everything came together exactly the way it was supposed to. Some horses need convincing," Florence said, echoing his words from that long-ago day. And some people do too, Sam added, taking her hand. I am glad I was able to convince you that you were worth loving. Florence Jenkins Donovan. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You convinced me of a lot of things, Florence said. That I was strong, that I was capable, that I was beautiful. You saw me when I could not even see myself. That was the greatest gift you ever gave me. They sat in comfortable silence, their hands clasped together, watching the sun set over the red rocks that had been the backdrop to their entire life together. Florence thought about all the years they had shared, all the challenges they had overcome, all the joy they had found in each other and in their family. As the years continued to pass, Sam and Florence gradually handed over more responsibility for the ranch to Thomas and his family. They were still active and involved, but they also took time to simply enjoy each other's company. They would ride out together to see the horses in the pasture, or take long walks through the property they had worked so hard to build. When Sam's parents passed away in 1902, Sam inherited a small amount of money. He used it to build Florence a proper house for her horse breeding operation, complete with spacious stalls and a large arena for training. It was more than she had ever dreamed of, and she threw her arms around him and cried with happiness. You have spent your whole life making my dreams come true, she said. How can I ever thank you enough? You already have, Sam said. Every single day, just by being exactly who you are. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903 with a large gathering of family and friends. All 4 of their children were there, along with their spouses and 9 grandchildren. Jasmine, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, traveled from her orchard to attend. She pulled Florence aside during the party and said, I told you he was a good one. You have built a beautiful life together. We have, Florence agreed, looking around at the crowded room full of people she loved. I am so grateful for all of it. As Florence entered her 60s, she began to slow down slightly. Her joints ached on cold mornings, and she could not work as long or as hard as she once had. But Sam was always there, taking on the harder tasks, making sure she did not overexert herself. He was graying and his movements were slower than they once were, but he was still strong and capable. They spent more time together, just the 2 of them, enjoying the simple pleasures of each other's company. They would sit on the porch and watch the grandchildren play, or ride out to check on the horses together, moving at a more leisurely pace than in their younger years. In the spring of 1910, Florence's father passed away at the age of 82. She traveled to Cedar City for the funeral, and as she stood beside his grave, she thought about all the lessons he had taught her. He had been a good man, a fair man, and he had raised her to be strong and independent. She was grateful that he had lived long enough to see the success she and Sam had built, to know his grandchildren and even some of his great-grandchildren. Sam stood beside her throughout the funeral, his hand on her back, offering silent support. When they returned home, Florence clung to him and told him how much she loved him, how grateful she was that they had found each other. I cannot imagine my life without you, she said. You are everything to me. And you to me, Sam replied. Always and forever. Their 30th anniversary in 1908 was a quieter affair than their 25th had been. Just family gathered at the ranch for a simple dinner. But Florence treasured it just as much. She looked around the table at her children and grandchildren, at Sam sitting at her side, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the abundant life she had been given. As they moved into their 70s, Sam and Florence became the beloved matriarch and patriarch of a large, thriving family. The ranch was now run primarily by Thomas and his sons, but Sam still offered advice and Florence still managed the breeding records for the horses. They had become fixtures in the St. George community, known for their generosity and their strong family values. Young couples would sometimes come to them for advice, and Sam and Florence were always happy to share the lessons they had learned over their decades together. Be patient with each other, they would say. Remember that you are on the same team. Never go to bed angry. And always make time to simply be together, to talk and laugh and remember why you fell in love in the first place. In 1915, they celebrated their 37th anniversary. Sam was 72 and Florence was 69, and they had been blessed with 14 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. The ranch had grown to over 500 acres, and the Jenkins name was known throughout the territory for quality horses and cattle. One evening that summer, they rode out together to watch the sunset from the same mesa where Sam had first told Florence he was falling in love with her. It had been more than 35 years, but Florence remembered that evening as clearly as if it had been yesterday. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Sam as they sat watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. "Choosing me? Building this life here?" Sam looked at her with those gray-green eyes that had captivated her from the first moment she saw him. "Not for a single second," he said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Florence. You and our children and this life we built together. I would not change a single moment of it." "Not even the hard times?" Florence asked. "The years when we barely had enough to eat? The times when we thought we might lose everything?" "Not even those," Sam said, "because we went through them together, and every challenge we overcame just made us stronger. You have been my partner in every sense of the word, Florence. My equal, my companion, my love. I am the luckiest man alive." Florence leaned against him, feeling his arm come around her shoulders. They sat there until the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, just as they had done so many years before. "Some horses need convincing," Florence said softly, "and some cowboys need to find exactly the right woman to make their lives complete," Sam replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. They rode home through the gathering darkness, two people who had built a life and a love that would endure for generations. Behind them, the ranch they had created from nothing but hard work and determination spread out across the Utah landscape. Ahead of them, their family was gathered at the house, lights glowing warm in the windows. Florence Jenkins Donovan thought about the scared, uncertain woman she had been at 26, sitting on a horse that refused to move, convinced that she would always be alone. She thought about the handsome cowboy who had shown her kindness and patience, who had seen past her insecurities to the person she truly was. She thought about the years of hard work and joy, of children and grandchildren, of struggles overcome and dreams fulfilled. Life had not always been easy, but it had been good. So very, very good. And as Sam helped her down from her horse and they walked hand in hand toward their home, Florence knew that if she could do it all over again, she would not change a single thing. The love story that began with a stubborn horse on a dusty trail had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. It was a love built on respect and partnership, on patience and kindness, on the simple act of one person seeing another truly and choosing to cherish what they found. And as the door closed behind them and the sounds of family laughter drifted from inside the house, Florence squeezed Sam's hand and smiled. Some horses needed convincing, it was true. But some love stories, once they began, never really ended. They just grew deeper and richer with every passing year, becoming the foundation upon which entire families and futures were built. They had been young once, full of dreams and hopes. Now they were old, surrounded by the tangible proof that those dreams had come true. The ranch would continue after they were gone, passed down through generations. The horses Florence had bred would carry their riders across the Utah landscape for decades to come. And the love story of Sam and Florence Donovan would be told and retold by their descendants. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life begin with the smallest acts of kindness. That night, lying in bed beside her husband of 37 years, Florence whispered, "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for helping me when I needed it most. Thank you for giving me the chance to know you, Sam replied. For trusting me, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me. They fell asleep holding hands, just as they had done every night for nearly 4 decades. And outside their window, the Utah stars shone bright and clear, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss all those years ago on the mesa, eternal and unchanging witnesses to a love that had lasted a lifetime. The years continued their steady march forward, and Sam and Florence grew older together with the same grace and partnership that had defined their entire marriage. When Sam's health began to fail in his late 70s, Florence cared for him with tireless devotion. And when Florence struggled with her own ailments, Sam was always there, offering support and comfort. They lived to see their great-great-grandchildren born, to see the ranch flourish beyond anything they had imagined in those early struggling years. The Jenkins name became synonymous with quality and integrity in southern Utah, and it all traced back to that September day in 1878 when a horse refused to move and a cowboy offered help to a woman who needed it. On a warm October afternoon in 1920, Samuel Donovan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 77, with Florence holding his hand. She grieved deeply for the loss of her life partner, but she was also grateful for the 42 years they had shared, for the family they had raised, for the legacy they had built together. Florence lived for another 3 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who adored her. She spent her final years sharing stories about Sam, about their early struggles, about the love that had sustained them through everything. She told anyone who would listen about the day her horse refused to move, and how a kind cowboy had changed her entire life. When Florence Jenkins Donovan passed away in the spring of 1923 at the age of 77, she was buried beside Sam on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. At her funeral, attended by more than 200 people, their oldest son Thomas told the story of how his parents met. "My father always said that some horses need convincing," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "And my mother needed convincing too, convincing that she was worthy of love, that someone could see her for the remarkable woman she was. My father saw her, truly saw her, and he spent the rest of his life making sure she knew how much she was valued and loved. That is the legacy they leave us. Not just this ranch, not just the horses and the land, but the example of a love built on kindness, respect, and unwavering partnership." The ranch continued to thrive under the management of the Donovan children and grandchildren. The horses that descended from Sage, the mare Sam had given Florence on their 10th anniversary, were still being bred and sold throughout the West. And every new generation of Donovans heard the story of how their great-great-grandparents met, of the stubborn horse and the kind cowboy and the love that grew from a single act of helpfulness. Years turned into decades, and the story became family legend. But the essence of it remained true and powerful. Samuel and Florence Donovan had found each other against all odds, had built something lasting and beautiful, and had loved each other with a devotion that never wavered. Their story was proof that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that kindness mattered, and that sometimes the best things in life happened when you were brave enough to say yes to possibility. The ranch they built still stands, now managed by the 6th generation of Donovans. On the hillside where Sam and Florence are buried, their great-great-great-grandchildren sometimes come to sit and look out over the land their ancestors claimed from the Utah wilderness. And if you ask them about their family history, they will tell you about the fat girl whose horse refused to move, and the cowboy who led it and said, "Some horses need convincing." But they will also tell you that it was never really about the horse. It was about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who recognized something special in each other, and who had the courage to build a life together. It was about respect and partnership, about seeing past surface appearances to the person underneath, about choosing love every single day for more than 4 decades. That is the real legacy of Samuel and Florence Donovan. Not just the successful ranch or the renowned horses or the large extended family. The real legacy is the example they set of what love can be when it is given freely, cherished deeply, and nurtured constantly. Their story reminds us that everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to stop and offer help, to look past the surface and see the beautiful person underneath. Some horses need convincing. Some people do too. But once convinced, once they understand they are valued and loved, they can accomplish extraordinary things. They can build ranches and raise families and create legacies that last for generations. They can find happiness in the simple joys of partnership and companionship. They can love with their whole hearts and be loved in return. And that, in the end, is the greatest success story of all.